Hey, Blizzard, you messed up. Big time. Patch 1.1 dropped yesterday for Diablo 4, and literally not a single soul on the planet is actually happy about this patch, and there is no way to put this lightly. Hype for Season 1 for the vast majority of players has been killed, just completely wiped out. There are at least a dozen major things that players have been asking for, things that are genuine issues we've noticed in the hundreds of millions of hours, by the way, of playtime that the community has racked up as a whole. Things that make the game just sort of frustrating currently, and how many of those were fixed in this patch? Exactly zero. They weren't even mentioned. On top of that, they made every single character weaker offensively, they limited our top end potential a significant amount, and hey, how about a nerf to survivability across the board that makes even the tankiest of builds no longer actually feel tanky in any real way? Oh, one of my favorite bits, cooldown reduction was being prioritized by players, so they nerfed it to make it feel less annoying if you don't have it. What? This is a gross way to interpret that. The way to make it feel less of a detriment to not have cooldown reductions is to reduce the cooldowns for everyone. Sure, go ahead, nerf the cooldown reduction stat, but only if you're going to compensate that by reducing these cooldowns that people were actually using the stat for, the ones that people thought that this stat was necessary to be able to use. Because for the most part, people weren't using this stat to get overpowered, they were using it to just make builds function as a base in the first place. And by nerfing this, you've essentially just killed a number of builds without offering any alternatives. It sucks. And this is just one of many examples of the things in this patch that I don't agree with in the slightest. Before I get too deep into it, it's pretty apparent that the developers are aware of just how angry the community is about all of this, because they scheduled a surprise Campfire Chat developer stream for this upcoming Friday out of nowhere within 8 hours of the patch coming out. They want to talk about this now, and this is possibly the most dangerous thing that they could do realistically, and I'll make it clear why. The community is extremely frustrated with the changes that the team chose to focus on for this, and the changes that the team refuses to make as well. If they do this stream and they don't offer any actual timelines on actual changes that people have been asking for, if they don't say something like, hey, yeah, we'll add more stash space next week, it's just going to make people even angrier. As it currently stands, a large percentage of the player base is just completely demoralized about the concept of playing this game now. They just don't care. This patch is simply one of the biggest letdowns in recent gaming history. Diablo 4 at launch was fun. They did some nerfs, of course, but then they did some buffs and everyone was feeling pretty good about it, right? Then we all knew Season 1 was approaching, we were all sort of building hype for it. We all knew there was going to be a big patch right beforehand, maybe it would even fix some of the issues that we had. After all, since launch, players have been politely bringing up issues that they thought needed to be fixed when it came to monster density in the game. Certain monsters doing enough damage to one-shot characters, which just feels unfair, especially when it's not super high content. The whole resistance system in the entire game just not functioning properly, which not only makes all of us squishier, but absolutely screws over sorcerers, whose main stat is intelligence, and they should be basically immune to resistances as a result of that, but they aren't. Dungeon Finder, or just general looking for group systems, as they sort of built Diablo 4 to essentially be the Diablo MMO. Stash changes or upgrades because we desperately need more stash space, not to mention the ability to filter loot that is in your stash or even your inventory in different ways. Things like by type of legendary aspect, by specific legendary aspect, even frickin' alphabetically would have helped a significant amount. And all of these issues, which aren't even all of the issues, just the top of the barrel, not a single one of these, not even one, was even mentioned in this massive patch. The only real thing I consider a meaningful positive change, they made it so the max level requirement of sacred items is now 60, and the max level requirement of ancestrals is now 80, which is good for your alt characters. Too bad that they killed alt leveling hard, and so a ton of players who would have gotten to enjoy this change now just will not interact with it because of that. That said, okay, maybe they are working slowly, right? I can handle that. Maybe they are planning to work this stuff out during the season, right? If the only bad news is that they didn't address quality of life concerns, that is annoying but not game destroying. Well, what if I told you that they reduced all of the relevant gear stats by an insane amount? The thing is, the game is built on math at its core, realistically. The math was created while they were making the game in a way that makes damage multipliers worth more than additives. That's just the way that math is. Specifically, this was applying to crit damage and vulnerable damage, ending up making making them more valuable than pure damage additive increases. They obviously knew this when they made the game though. They made it that way, and yet they still seem totally surprised that people were using this to their advantage. And so what did they do? They decided that this is bad. They nerfed crit damage, they nerfed vulnerable damage, both of them an insane amount. They nerfed cooldown reduction because they didn't like that people were having fun with that stat. They nerfed a ton of defensive affixes on gear that made people actually able to take part in high-end content of the game. And why did they do all of this? Because they wanted to make the affixes on gear feel more equal so that you wouldn't feel pressed to have one over the other. What a load of horseshit. These affixes aren't equal because that's just how the game works. Some of them will be better than others. You specifically put all of the affixes in the game. You knew which affixes you were putting in, you knew some of them would be better than others, and you made the ones that you genuinely realized were better be rarer to acquire, so you clearly knew that they were all good. You made the enchanter prioritize certain ones when you realized that they were important, so you clearly knew that they were good, but because you want people to use weird niche flat damage increases instead, you reduced vulnerable damage upgrades across the board by 40%? That's insane. Yes, I agree that vulnerable was arguably too strong. It just was. Your build was at a significant disadvantage if you didn't have a way to apply vulnerable, and having vulnerable damage stats on gear was really good. And yet, this does not fix that. This change doesn't change that. Vulnerable is still a multiplier, and so even without any vulnerable damage boosts on gear, having vulnerable is still really strong. You're still forcing people to use those skills. All you did was punish the people who were already using it, and the people who were stacking the damage to actually make it a little bit better. Yes, this does even the playing field, but it doesn't make the people who are doing low damage closer to the people doing high damage. It just pushes everyone down a ton in a really strange way. Just why? Why do this? Why do it in this way? Here's my biggest bit of constructive criticism here. These nerfs, they could be acceptable, but not in this way. You cannot apply this big of a nerf to the entire player base in one single patch, and you absolutely can't do it without also offering some significant buffs in other areas to compensate it. You have to make people actually want to play the game, and they did add some buffs, but they didn't add enough to compensate for just how much they destroyed certain things. You have to make people feel like their time spent in the game so far has been meaningful in at least a little bit of a way, because doing this the way that they have, one gigantic nerf all at once without any truly compensating buffs, has just killed most hype for Season 1. And when I say this is one of the biggest fumbles in recent gaming history, Season 1 hype was actually riding decently high. Season 1 is now a day away, but was just 2 days after this patch. This was their big opportunity to address some quality of life issues, buff off-meta playstyles to let people swap things up and try new things that are actually could be strong in the season, and just really incentivize and foster that excitement for the season, make people enjoy playing the game, make people more excited for what's to come. What did we get? An absolute dump truck of changes that feel like they scream, we actually want you to take a break from the game and come back later. To put it simply, up until this point, I've been very fair, I feel like. I've been giving the developers a really big benefit of the doubt sort of thing, where I've not been judging them too hard on the minor changes that they haven't been making, on the major changes that they've been taking a while with. It's a really big game, and getting it perfect before launch was never going to be 100% on point. It just wasn't. But every time they've done nerfs and they've not addressed quality of life stuff, I've just sort of kept my chin up. I've accepted it. I've said they're doing it in the future. Just give it a chance. Give it some time, right? But today, after this patch, even after sleeping on it, trying to calm down about this whole thing, it feels like we paid to beta test this game. These are not changes that feel like they should happen a month and a half after release. These are changes that feel like they should have happened before launch, but they clearly didn't have enough people testing the high-end content before that, creating builds in the endgame, testing stats in the endgame, all of that, and now it feels like they've used us, all the people who spent a load of money on this game, to tell them, hey, this stuff is strong, by the way, and then they used that information to nerf the hell out of us. They say this is for the health of the game long term, but what about the health of the game right now? What about short term? Because you just let millions of people come in for a month and a half and experience the game the way that it was, something that they considered a lot of fun, and then you tore it apart. It's weird. It's not right. There are better ways to do this. They could have applied these same nerfs over a longer period of time. They could have given us strong enough buffs to compensate while also diversifying our choices, or at the very goddamn least, they could have addressed some modicum of our quality of life complaints while also nerfing us into the ground, because that might to make it feel at least a little bit better, because this is just unacceptable to the vast majority of the player base. That Campfire Chat on Friday has a lot to answer for. They better have some really properly genuine answers to quality of life. They better have a good timeline on monster density increases, and they better tell us that we have some buffs in the pipeline to make it all feel better, because this, right at this moment, it ain't it. Not to mention, a lot of these nerfs feel like they are meant to compensate for the power increase that we'll get from Malignant Hearts in Season 1, but that's just stupid. If that is the problem, if you think the Malignant Hearts are too strong, nerf the hearts before we see them. You know why? The Eternal Realm still exists. A large portion of players who still want to be playing this game will be moving to the Seasonal Realm, but for anyone who isn't doing that, and there is a decent portion of people who will be doing that, they do not get these new powers. They do not get these character-affecting buffs. They just have to live with all of these nerfs that apply to the game as a whole without getting any sort of compensation for that as far as the new Malignant Heart powers, and that's just stupid, honestly. They have killed the Eternal Realm just completely. Aside from all of this, there were even a bunch of shadow nerfs and buffs within this patch that weren't even a part of the patch notes itself, almost as if they were trying to hide them from us for some reason. For Druid, the Envenom passive in-game has had its wording changed, and it was changed from a multiplier to an additive bonus, which is a massive hit if it did work that way, but after testing it, it seems it's just a visual change, probably just a bug with the way they changed the tooltip, but this is still a multiplier. It's just a tooltip error. On top of that, Avian Wrath, a Druid Spirit Boon that has been bugged since launch to actually be an additive bonus, even though it always has stated it's a multiplier, has now been fixed to actually be a multiplier. This is actually a big positive change for Druids, and they didn't even put it in the patch notes, which is nuts to me, because with all of the negatives they put in, they probably should have mentioned the positives, because it would at least make the Druids feel a little bit better. Necromancer Golems apparently no longer produce bonus corpses, according to the tooltip, because, you know, Minion Necromancer has just had it too good for too long. Serration, the passive that increases the crit chance of bone skills, now increases it by 0.3% for every 30 essence you have when cast, which used to be every 10 essence, making a significant shadow nerf to Bone Spear. Sorcerer got a shadow buff to Firebolt, 10% damage up to 18%, 5% damage over time up to 7%, but duration down from 8 seconds down to 6 seconds. Hydra Lucky Hit Chance was changed from 53% all the way down to 2.5%. I can only assume this is to make it so the Lucky Hit Chance actually happens on every hit that the Hydra shoots, whereas the 53% would have just been a lucky hit chance when spawning the Hydra. Same thing for Ice Blades, lucky hit down from 71% all the way to 5%, as well as Lightning Spear lucky hit chance down from 26% to 5%. And then also Incinerate, mana cost down from 25 per second to 12. So Sorcerer did actually get a few secret buffs, and not a single one of them truly matters enough to make up for the absolute pain that Sorcerer has received in the actual patch notes themselves. Not to mention the slap in the face that the unique added for Sorcerer is just a silly little teleport to random locations, and the legendary added for Sorcerer is just a cool concept making firewall block projectiles that will never see actual use in proper combat, because Sorcerer is still fundamentally broken as a class in the later game content. Blizzard themselves released stats that Sorcerer was the most played class in the base game, and yet with Sorcerer already having to deal with a broken main stat due to resistances not functioning correctly, they also just nerfed the hell out of it. And then when they added a new legendary and unique for the class, they made them entirely irrelevant flavor items that won't actually be usable. I do not get it. I don't even know what else to say at this point. Oh, actually, yes I do, because they also nerfed XP gain for frickin' everyone by changing how enemies scale above you, which seems to be their attempt at slowing down power leveling your friends for whatever damn reason that they decided that needed to be stopped, and instead has just made leveling slower for literally everyone, after they specifically boosted leveling speed a couple of weeks ago after a lot of complaints about the speed of leveling. So we brought up an issue, they fixed it for us, then they made it worse again. What the hell is that? Not to mention that Hell Tides are literally broken right now. They upped the cost of mystery chests from 175 to 250, which is nuts. They upped the level of enemies in Hell Tides, which is, you know, it's not a big deal, it's whatever. But then on top of that, the drop rate on Cinder's, the Hell Tide currency, seems to have dropped about 60%, which is just inexplicable. They have confirmed that one specifically is a bug at the very least, so at least there is room for this to be fixed in the near future, but I don't know. If you're feeling pretty demoralized, I understand that, and you should remember that the season pass that you have guaranteed raid if you purchase the deluxe or ultimate version of the game does not have to be claimed on Season 1. So you can just take a break from it if you feel that you need to and use it on Season 2 or 3 when you feel the itch to play again. I am upset about all this, but I'm still going to play the game. I love Diablo 4 for what it is at its core. No matter how much they mess with it, it will take a hell of a lot to make me actually stop. I'm just upset about it, you know? But as of right now, I'm just sort of sitting here, sadly and slowly adjusting to the new normal of what this game is, because I'm still going to play it, and it has completely sort of just ruined my trust in Blizzard to apply good changes in a timely manner. We will see what this Campfire Chat stream on Friday leads to, but they're going to have to make some really big promises with really firm timelines for it to fix what they did with this patch. That's it then, really, everyone. All of the things that I wanted to talk about with this patch, because, well, it feels like not a single person outside of Blizzard themselves is happy with this patch, and then, even then, they probably realized afterwards they maybe could have done something a bit different, because I cannot believe they didn't expect this kind of backlash on a patch that nerfs every player in the game, and yet it feels like they didn't have any idea that the community would have this reaction, which is just silly. I hope you've enjoyed this somehow. The little bit of news that I had to share, of course, the hidden patch changes, the stream coming up on Friday, but really, I'll be honest, I was mostly just ranting because I'm disappointed and I understand the feelings that you're all having right now. I'm not necessarily angry. I'm just disappointed because Season 1 could have been such a fun milestone, and instead it has just been completely overshadowed by patch 1.1 doing what it has, nerfing all of us, and not giving us the quality of life that we were looking for. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.